Mike Vrabel wouldn't be a bad choice either. But I think it's always everyone's thinking top of Bill Belichick. But I feel like it's going to be someone random that no one's talking about though. I just don't know who. It's kind of hard to tell.
I like Vrabel is a really good. I mean, for a lot of the reasons that we were giving Bill Belichick, Vrabel might be an even better choice because maybe he doesn't have as big of a ego when it comes to not wanting Bill Belichick might be I'm only interested in being a head coach, which he has the cachet to say that. But maybe Vrabel, I mean, for the same reasons, saying hey, I got to work with Kyle Shanahan and learn the offensive system. He's obviously, I mean, under Tennessee, I have no idea why they let him go. I know they,
Oh, they let him go because him and the owner were beefing over something stupid.
Morale-wise, his players always played really hard for him. I felt like he helped turn around some culture.
Linebackers coach background.
Yeah, that's everything the 49ers like, right?
You know what else is crucial? His defenses have always put the clamps on Patrick Mahomes. And I think at this point, you got to hire someone.
Dude, you got to go out and get freaking.
You got to hire someone. You got to think that. You're not worried about the NFC because I think I think you could pretty much. I mean, we just saw them with Steve Wilks. We saw them still have a capable defense against the whole NFC. Really, it's just who can we do against Mahomes or a Josh Allen, right? And I think he's capable of that.
Instead of how I think a lot of people talk about this, right? Building your team to previous years, maybe the Seahawks would try to build their team to beat the 49ers or whatever. But I think you're right. Right now, with how the NFC West seems to be a lower, not as competitive division for the next couple of years, and why the 49ers are trying to capitalize basically this upcoming year on Brock Purdy having a rookie contract still. I kind of think you're right. You need to kind of forget the NFC West, assume that you're going to be good enough to win your division and start building your team or getting in, bringing in small pieces to fill out your team to go against the Chiefs and whoever you assume you're going to play in the Super Bowl if you have confidence to get there.
Speaking of conspiracy, well, this is not a conspiracy. My thing is sign Aziz to fill in for Jerry Greenlaw. Mike Vrabel comes back. Aziz is the talking hand. Hey, this guy is good, guys. That's where I'm leaning towards. I mean, I think I would go internally first and foremost, but if they're going external, my vote is Vrabel. And you bring Aziz over a year, $3.5 million, because honestly, at least it'll fit nicely.
I didn't even tell Jose this, and look at who I have written.
I think that's where you got to go. I don't think you're gonna be able to trust your rookie linebacker yet, or at least you hope to develop them, right? But that would be perfect because Aziz comes for a year, 3.5, maybe 4. I'm not sure how great of a season he had last year, as opposed to his couple.
My problem is I do wonder if Aziz will make too much money to be brought in, especially.
But he might just come back just to feel capable. But I think that would be a cool pairing, him with Vrabel. You get another it feels too much of a good fit. And just how you mentioned, I think honestly Vrabel gains more from learning the Shanahan system than Bill Belichick does. Because how many years does Bill Belichick have in head coaching? If he does take this year as defensive coordinator, outside of this year, I think Bill Belichick's going to call the reps no later than 2028. Vrabel's still relatively young. He's got about 20 plus years in his bag.
Yeah.
You do this,
and he can totally take a step back to be a DC for a year and then get a
This will be his best defense because he's been a DC before for the Texans, a linebackers coach. He's gone up the wire. He's a great leader. He's smart. I think he'd be a great fit. I think he'd be the best fit, honestly, even more than as much as I'm still advocating for internally.
I like this. I'm team Vrabel. I think that was a good, especially with his specialty being in the linebacker. And does he run the wide 9? Is he comfortable with that?
I think it's still going to be something where he's going to have to adapt to. But Shanahan said, hey, if he wants to make changes or wholesale changes, it's got to make. I think at this point I think Kyle Shanahan at this time is going to be a little more open.
Open, right? Yeah, I agree.
And I think you can be more open because you're willing to be more open for a Bill Belichick
why were you not open with me?
You're more open to be with a Bill Belichick and a Mike Vrabel than you are for a Steve Wilks because Steve Wilks hasn't he didn't have the resume, and as much I advocated for Wilks last year. My thing was just look, DBs, I think he'd be a fine fit, and he's never had a talent like he has before, and he was fine. He was fine. He was pretty solid this year, but it just wasn't, you just weren't reaching your peak. You weren't juicing the most out of your players that you could have gotten out of, and we saw it in the playoffs, right? Especially that Lions game. But yeah, I I just think I think my externally it's Vrabel, internally it's Daniel Bullock. That's where I'm looking at.
I really, really like Vrabel. And I was also the one I was saying, I think it's going to be Daniel Bullock, especially if Kawakami is right and maybe they've already established it. Like, in order to keep, because I always feel like when it's an external candidate, someone lets someone leak and you kind of hear about interviews beforehand.
Right, we didn't hear Belichick or Vrabel's been in an interview yet. That's crazy to me. Where it's like Kawakami's like, oh, they have their guy. Like, oh goddamn, they're internally interviewing them. Johnny Holland. I've heard Nick Sorensen as a guy, or maybe even the lead guy. You never know about Daniel Bullock's.
This guy says Chris Coughlin, Marquard Manuel, or Corey Underlin make the most sense to run the defense. 49ers like and fit the players around and be around for a few years. Don't need to get just a big name.
That's kind of a big jump to skip from being a full-on position coach than coordinator. But I mean, I think the reason why Nick Sorensen's the guy is because he pretty much touches every level of the 49ers defense. And I think he is the defensive pass game coordinator or something like that, right? So with him, it's like at least you have someone who can see everything collectively. Whereas like you get someone like a position coach, like a Holland, like a Bullocks, and it's like they know they'll be elite at this, but how can they bridge with the other? But I think ultimately whoever they hire internally will be fine because again, they already know the other coaches. They already know what Kyle wants. I mean, look, Deshaun Gibson told me he would not have came to the 49ers if it wasn't for Daniel Bullocks. So to me, and he pretty much says like, dude, he's literally a Kyle Shanahan guy, like to the T. So I was like, okay, if Kyle Shanahan wants to hire himself, there goes Daniel Bullocks, right? And so I think that'll work perfectly if they hire him.
And you have to think like too, is Kyle Shanahan's takeaway from this Super Bowl like I need to kind of relinquish a little bit of power and distribute things, or will his takeaway be like I need to be in even more
never
control?
Relinquishing power. If anything, he's mad that
if he is going for a Vrabel or a Belichick, I think that comes with like relinquishing some power. If he's hiring internally, he's going to feel like he can kind of tell those guys what to do. And remember that ESPN article that came out before the Super Bowl where he's like watching them all? You know, those guys are all familiar with that. And Kyle Shanahan can be, intercoming in, freaking Fred Warner, you're not looking at the play.